just went with individuality and personal freedom.
I was going to make a joke at the beginning of this as we have started, as like, what are each of you wearing to express your individuality and freedom of yourselves? But welcome. We're here at our David Lynch cast, as it is, or our David Lynch book club, as it is, and we're taking a detour. We did Dune a few weeks back, and based on Kevin's suggestion, before we roll into more Twin Peaks with The Return and Fire Walk with Me, you picked a couple of movies, and we're going to start with the first one in chronological order, I believe, of kind of films that kind of shape more of like Lynch's vision as an auteur and kind of more of what Twin Peaks The Return would be, or at least give people a better understanding kind of from his style as a director. And that first film is Wild at Heart, which is, how would you describe this movie? As like a crime road trip love story?
It is David Lynch decided to make his own take on a Bob Hope Bing Crosby road movie. And that's what this is.
Well, that's actually because we postponed from last week.
Changes the location, like
that is the I watched a lot of the special features Friday night on the Shout Factory Blu-ray, and in the making or one of the special features, the actor J.E. Freeman described it as that. He's like, it's a Bob Hope Bing Crosby movie, just from hell.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting we're following
it's
up.
awesome because, like, as I was watching it. Oh, no, go ahead, Colin. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it's interesting that you talked about how we did Dune last time. And I was thinking about how, like, this was an interesting one to follow it up with because like Dune for David Lynch was in so many ways, well, failure is not the right word, but maybe disappointment because it didn't do well at the box office, and he was disappointed with how the whole process went and the final cut and all the rest of that. So regardless of how we can appreciate it now, you know, sort of going from that experience, and then Wild at Heart in so many ways was his like yes, he did Blue Velvet in the middle, but I mean, I feel like with Wild at Heart winning the Palme d'Or and just getting this like massive, like, I mean, it certainly wasn't like a box office, you know, blockbuster or anything, but definitely it was a success in ways that, you know, in all the ways that Dune wasn't, right? In terms of getting the kind of, you know, I mean, it was mixed critically, I think, generally, but I mean, winning the Palme d'Or and just sort of putting him on the map again as this like auteur, right? That I think that in so many ways, this is a bit of a vindication for him in terms of, you know, him getting to do what he wants to do now, right? As opposed to what he was wrestling with Dune, right? So anyways, it was interesting to go from one to the other. And I was thinking about that as I was watching it.
I think it's interesting.
And also, like, this is almost. I was just going to say that this is like, when you think about when this came out in 1990, this is like peak David Lynch time because he's got Twin Peaks and it's, you know, blowing things up on the pop culture circuit, Emmy darling, critical darling, and then he has Wild at Heart, wins the Palme d'Or, critically acclaimed. You know, like he is really in like his ultimate like time right here. This is where like peak David Lynch, you know, is where he's at, where he's like in the he's in the pop culture zeitgeist, and he's also like critically acclaimed. Like he's getting to do what he wants to do. He's getting to be who he wants to be. I mean, this is like the best stretch right here for David Lynch. I don't know that he possibly has had a better year than 1990
right,
when you think about all of those things happening at once.
Yeah, 100%. Because this came out sort of in the summer in between seasons 1 and 2. So he was still riding high from the success of season 1 of Twin Peaks. Yep. So yeah, no, it was, you're right. I think this is like a pinnacle of a certain kind of success, right? I mean, he, you know, personally there might be other films, I don't know, that he might personally love more than this one, but he, but definitely in terms of just generalized, like, acceptance out there in the world, I think you're right. I mean, I think before he was like an up and comer when he was like given, the opportunity to do Elephant Man, and then of course Dune had all the blowback that it had, and then he started rebuilding with Blue Velvet. But here with Twin Peaks and this film, he was, I think you're right, like at the ascendancy of his success.
Yeah, I think this is like him being like king of the mountain at this point, right? It's kind of an interesting, we'll get into it when we get to the earlier films, but if you think of it, Eraserhead is like this little low budget indie film, and then he goes and makes this biopic drama that gets Oscar nominated. Mel Brooks produces it, I guess saw some sort of talent or something in Eraserhead that made him feel like that's the guy to make this movie. And I wouldn't really consider Dune his blank check after the success of Elephant Man, because that movie was going to get made regardless if he directed it or not. Dino De Laurentiis would have found somebody.
Yeah.
And then Blue Velvet's kind of like, okay, here's me coming back as the filmmaker I want to be. And with the success of Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, it's like Wild at Heart is him like cashing in to do a blank check finally.
Yeah, and I remember at the time, like I was pretty young, but I was like starting to, be interested in film, and I mean his name was everywhere, and he was, definitely had this reputation for the, American avant-garde sort of cinema, right? That, had him on the front of that end of filmmaking.
And as much as Blue Velvet lays the groundwork for what becomes Twin Peaks and other films, watching this again after seeing all of Twin Peaks, I'm like, this is the Reformation. This is David Lynch fully formed. This is where David Lynch is going to be like the rest of his career. This is him. He's a fully formed artist now.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I think what was really interesting watching this again was looking at the cast and the crew and seeing so many people from Twin Peaks involved with this film. I didn't realize Eric DeRay was one of their casting directors. So Leo Johnson is one of your casting directors. Frank Silva, he helped work on that. Frank was working on the crew. So you got Bob helping out. And then of course you've got, Sherilyn Fenn, Cheryl Lee, like you've got a wonderful, it was just, it's a great who's who of David, Grace Zabriskie, and one of the most amazing performances, like terrifying and crazy. God damn. David Patrick Kelly, Twin Peaks alumni, in the film. And you've even got the guy who,
Jack Nann,
what else thought was cool. Yeah, Jack Nance. Yeah, but like the cinematographer is the same guy who shot Eraserhead for him, and I'm like, that's so cool. Like it's really neat. Then you've got Joanna Reyes, of course, involved as she is with all of his stuff. Mary Sweeney, and then you've got Frances Bay as a madam. Like that just Mrs. Chalfont is a madam down in New Orleans for Mr. Reindeer. So it's like you've got all of these amazing connections to Twin Peaks, which is wonderful. But I guess for me, like discussing this film, the 90s have these three movies that I love, and I think they'd make a hell of a triple feature. And that's like these weird couples, in love, on the run, young and rebellious. You get Wild at Heart, you get True Romance, and you get Natural Born Killers. And it's almost like that's like a hell of a triple feature that would be totally worth taking. But yeah, like these three films really have always stood out to me in the 90s. And so I was 14 going on 15 in 1990. So that's where I was when I saw Twin Peaks. And I had heard about Wild at Heart. So of course I had to see Wild at Heart because I had discovered, David Lynch. And so a buddy of mine was able to rent it. And we're watching it at his house. I'll never forget. And I think I've shared this before, but his mom came by and she was like, "What are you guys watching?" And he's like, "We're watching Wild at Heart." And she's like, "Oh, is that the movie with the lady who jumps the horse into the pool?" which was a movie that came out around the same time called Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. We were like, no, it's not that. Please don't sit down with us to watch this movie because it's absolutely not that film. So I always have that in the back of my head when I'm watching it. I can always just hear Mrs. Haynes making that comment, and it makes me laugh. But when I saw the film, I was genuinely gobsmacked by how just raw this film is. It is absolutely unflinching. When there is violence, it's violence. When there's sex, I'll tell you this, watching it, I forgot how fucking thirsty this film is. It is an absolutely thirsty film. There's like so much on the sexual front of things going on in this movie. It is just a thirsty movie. And it's great because even with everything that's in it, it's never gratuitous.
No, but I'd forgotten how young Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern were at this time. Like, they were like 20 and 22 or something like that. I don't know exactly, but very young, very at the very beginnings of their careers, right? And just they're
excellent.
Strong.
Like, God, they're so good together.
Yeah, they really are.
Absolutely.
So together. And like, you buy their relationship like wholeheartedly. Like it's you are with them. And that's the other side of it. Watching it now older, and I can appreciate more of the layers that are going on with it. It really is a romantic film. Like Sailor and Lula are absolutely each other's world, man. Like they got each other's backs. They will be there for each other no matter what's going on. And you really like love that about them. Like you want them to be happy. You want them to be, just living a great life, going out dancing, singing like Elvis and, everything that they do. Like you want them to have that. Like it's really, there's a lot to be said for that. Like you can look at the violence, you can look at the sex and all that. That's there. Don't get me wrong. It's David Lynch, but I just was really like floored this time by looking at it, but just how damn romantic the film really is. There's real beauty in their relationship. And like, that's real couples goals, like where you really are there for that other person. And that other person is your world, man. Like everybody wants to have a relationship like that. Fuck Joker and Harley Quinn. I want Sailor and Lula's relationship. That's the one, man.
I mean,
Hollywood without murder or manslaughter. I'm sorry, manslaughter.
But I mean, if we get into the roots of the story, they're two people that fell in love. He's not manipulating her or using her and vice versa.
Nope.
And Sailor just happened to be working for the wrong person, see the wrong thing at the wrong time, and gets
parental guidance, man.
Yeah. And they get sucked into this dark world, and this is very much like Twin Peaks 11 in a lot of ways, because there's the fire, there's all these affairs and back dealings. Like, oh my God, is like every man over 30 thirsty for Diane Ladd in this movie? And I gotta say, she understood the assignment and got it. I don't know if I've ever seen a melodramatic performance to that degree.
And the fact that she got nominated for an Oscar, I'm not saying she didn't deserve it. I'm just saying I'm surprised the Academy went there, because it's not the kind of performance the Academy normally goes for. Now, of course, she lost to Whoopi Goldberg, I think, for Ghost, which of course is iconic, and that's fair. But this was just a different kind of performance than we're used to having get that kind of recognition, right? And I think it's fabulous. I love her performance throughout the thing. Every time she was on the screen, I wanted more of her.
I think that's part of what got the nomination, is that it was something that even if you didn't like the film, even if you had no take away from, I hate this film, you cannot deny that woman's performance. She is an absolute force of nature. And I think what really works with her is she's a force of nature even when she's not on screen. Her presence is always there. She is permeating practically every scene, because there's always the threat of, these people are coming after me, and they're coming after me because of your mom. Your mom won't let us be together. Like, she is constantly being mentioned even when she's not there. So it almost feels like she's in the film a lot more than she really is,
right?
Because she is like sort of she's the Wicked Witch, she is, and
there's even the
really
images of her in the film,
right,
riding the
you can't
broom.
miss it. I think the bravery of that performance is really what got her that nomination. I mean, Jesus, the makeup, the lipstick scene alone is like, that's hand to God one of the greatest scenes like that Lynch has ever shot. Like the abrupt cut with that horrific music sting when it cuts to her with that full red face where it looks like blood practically. Yeah. Christ, man, that I can't imagine seeing that in the theater. I'd have jumped out of my goddamn seat. Like, that's terrifying, man.
Yeah, it is. It's maybe the most terrifying thing in the movie, and there are some other haunting
I don't know.
things.
Grace Zabriskie scares the shit out of me.
I mean, that is unhinged too.
She
and then of course
terrifying.
And then of course Willem Dafoe is both hilarious and disgustingly creepy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole
honestly
mask
that
thing,
he didn't get a nomination is kind of surprising, man.
Yeah. And like listening to him talking about putting in those fake teeth, he's like, and that's the character, is these teeth. It's surprising he never worked with Lynch again.
Yeah, they seem to be a good fit.
Yes.
Like when you think about Willem Dafoe, even up to today, and the great kind of roles that he takes, whether it's Poor Things last year or the upcoming, in Nosferatu, it looks like he's, got another one of those roles. And I actually really like
White House.
When he plays like, I like it when he takes one of those, like I like Sean Baker's film, The Florida Project, and how he's a nice guy in that one. And he's kind of an average Joe guy, and he pulls that off amazingly too. Like, he's such an incredible actor just in every, like, because he can be anything, and so often plays these characters that are so extreme, yet he makes them just feel so real, right? And so it is surprising that he and Lynch haven't worked together more, because they do seem like they would be aligned very well.
Yes, but getting back to the Oscar nomination for Diane Ladd, I think, part of it is just the level of commitment, like you guys were saying. Also, she's a legend at this point in her career as an actor.
Yeah.
And I think the reason she lost, not only because Ghost was such a popular and well-liked film at the time, but a lot of people were saying the reason Whoopi won the Oscar was because people thought she should have won Best Actress for The Color Purple, and they didn't give it to her. So this was like an apology. Like, here's your Oscar.
There's always all kinds of politics going on with Oscars and everything too. And this, you can get into it. We could do a whole podcast about that, but definitely, I still think it's amazing that she got nominated for this. I think it's very well deserved. I love her in this movie. She's like one of my favorite aspects of it. I also think it's amazing. Like, what were the conversations that she and Laura Dern were having when they're like,
as real mom and
film together
daughter.
As mom and daughter, and let's make this film. I think that's amazing.
She talks about
incredible roles.
Laura Dern even talked about, she talked about it was almost like therapy for them. And I'm like, I could see that. Like, I could genuinely see that. Like, it really was like therapy, but like, and I think that was also probably part of the appeal for the Academy with this role, was she's playing opposite her daughter, her actual real daughter. And to be able to commit to that kind of role, to commit to that level, playing opposite of your own honest to God flesh and blood, like that's an interesting place to be, man. And she is very much, for this film, what I think we can all agree she is to Wild at Heart what Piper Laurie is to Twin Peaks, man. Like,
absolutely.
She's just the phenomenal performance that is just always, any scene she's in, you can't take your eyes off of her. Any scene she's in, she's like one step ahead of everybody in that room practically. Like, God damn, like she is phenomenal in this movie. And if you have to put a gun in my head, who's your favorite character in this movie? Back in the day, I would have said Bobby Peru, just because, like, God, Willem Dafoe is amazing in that part. But honestly, now it's absolutely Diane Ladd. She is like, like I said, she's just a force in that film, man. She is an
Well, I
absolute force,
mean,
and I really don't think Lynch liked a whole lot. I think it was just kind of put the camera on her and just kind of let it play. I don't think he had to do a whole
I
lot to get her where he got.
I mean, it is soap opera to the 11th degree of soap opera acting, and I don't mean that as any disrespectful thing. I mean, she knows exactly what kind of performance you have to give for this style and this story, and it works. And I mean, there's a ton of other phenomenal people in the movie, but yeah, I think she
Everybody
takes
in
the
it's awesome.
movie.
Like there's no bad performance.
But she is the thing you remember. I mean, yeah, Bobby Prue is
Yeah,
also, you're right, but no, you think of her first, I think, when you think of Wild at Heart.
yeah,
Um,
she's the first thing you think of.
yeah,
I will say
even
Bobby
before,
Peru really goes to show
yeah,
that Willem Dafoe would have been an amazing Joker because there's a lot of the Joker in that Bobby
Oh
Peru, man. Like you
yeah.
could see where he could have been an amazing Joker. That smile with those horrific teeth, like I mean, he is nightmare fuel in that
yeah,
film. Like he's funny, and then suddenly he's terrifying, very much like the Joker should be. Like
right.
Bobby Peru is a really nice design of what a Joker should be in a film, and he would absolutely, even today, he would slay that part, man. That's all I'm saying.
So we kind of got Kevin's first reaction. Colin, when did you first see the movie?
So, I'm old enough. I saw it in theaters. I was a Twin Peaks fan. I was discovering David Lynch. He had a new film out. It just won the Palme d'Or. It was hitting theaters. It was divisive at the time, because, like I said, it won the Palme d'Or, but the critics were all over the map with it, right? Some were embracing it. Others were
Yeah,
like tearing it apart. It was all over the map. So yeah, no, I remember going, I mean, I was, you know, not sure I really understood it, but I will say this. So David Lynch, I mean, famously has described this film as Elvis and Marilyn falling in love in hell, right?
Yeah.
And I always took that literally. I always took it as this is a love story set in hell, like actually, like it's not, because it has that, like just like with Twin Peaks, the dreamer quality, right? Like what's real with all of the, and we'll get into the later, we'll get into the Wizard of Oz stuff, but like so much of the film has this unreal quality in the way it's filmed, the way it's cut in a very kind of
yeah,
like rapid and brutal kind of manner. And so I think always had that in the back of my mind, that what I'm watching is I'm watching like, sort of the damned, right? And finding love in the most horrible place in the world, right? And I've always treated this as that. And watching it again, I was still there. Like I still see Sailor, and because they're I mean, they had what Kevin was saying about their romance is true, but they're both so messed up, but they find each other in a way and support each other in a way that actually gives them some sort of sense that they might be able to be okay together. And there's something about that I just find really, really inspiring. So
Also, I mean, at this time in Hollywood, 1990, 1989, who is more perfect to play Sailor than Nicolas Cage? Not only because Nicolas Cage is obsessed with Elvis in real life, but also this is a point where
yeah,
Nicolas Cage is considered the weirdo bad boy.
yes,
He'll go to any depths to give you the weirdest performance
yeah,
on the
this is
planet.
pre Jerry Bruckheimer films, Con Air, sort of that sort. It's pre action
this
hero.
is post this
It's
is
like,
post Vampire's Kiss.
Yeah, and Raising Arizona, like that's what he was known for, right?
well, yeah,
That
because
kind of,
even in a mainstream movie like Moonstruck, he's
yeah,
giving a very weird and
yeah,
twitchy performance,
yeah,
you
that's right.
know? And that was probably the most mainstream thing he had done, because then Peggy Sue got married. He's doing the weird
Yeah,
voice, and like
Yeah,
he's bringing a
yeah,
different energy than everybody else in the movies he's in, even like the more down to earth films he's in.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
So no, it was
in
not
looking at
out of
this,
character for him. That's right.
no, I think what was interesting looking at this, though, because we all think of him in his more crazy out there roles, he is doing like Elvis in this, but it's a very understated role.
Yeah.
It's not
Mhm.
big and brash and crazy. There are moments of that, but that's not, he doesn't crank it up to 11 and keep it up there the whole time. There are moments
No, he
when he has to
doesn't.
crank it up, moments of violence, but in general, it's amazing how like low key he is. Lula is the bigger like personality of the two. When you just look at their conversations, like I love the fact that Sailor spends most of the time with her listening.
Yes.
That's what he does. He listens to her and he'll respond, but it's almost always responding. Anytime he has a conversation, it's any dialogue he has is in response practically to her. He doesn't really lead a lot of the scenes. It's almost always her. And I love that. Like, I love that Sailor takes the time to listen. Obviously, with the way she describes him, he's a hell of a lover. He's giving. He pays attention. Apparently,
Yeah, he's taking care of her. Yeah,
And he'll do
really
anything
almost
for
like he's
her,
talking on the inside,
including putting her needs ahead of his.
Yeah.
Like at the end, he's out to leave her because he thinks he's a bad influence, not because of what's best for him, but what he thinks is best for her and their kid.
Yes.
And it's not till he's sort of convinced otherwise by
their son,
the Good Witch. But you know but he's willing to give up his own happiness for her too.
And that's a testament to how talented
you really
Laura.
Respect him. Like,
sorry.
Yeah, Laura Dern is amazing, and really, like, you know, Lula is, God, she really is kind of like the heart and soul of this movie, like in a lot of ways. Like it's really a beautiful performance that Laura Dern puts out. She's very youthful, very vivacious, but she's got a real heart, and she feels really big. Like I love the scene where she's driving him through Texas, and everything on the radio is a horrible story.
Yes.
Like, you know, horrible story, people killing their kids or whatever.
Yes.
And she's like, you find me some goddamn music, because it's too much. It's too much for her. The real world is just too much. And she's so big in her feelings. And I love that moment. Like, I really, truly love that moment. And Sailor, what does he do? He doesn't ask questions. Nope. He doesn't ask why. He jumps right up into the front and starts finding the goddamn song. Like, that's what he does. And it is just, it's again, that scene is so indicative of their relationship. Like that scene is their relationship, like in a bottle. It's beautiful, man. Like, seriously, they are fucking #couple goals, man. Like, that's really it.
But I was going to say, it's just a testament, not only because of how great a character Lulu is, but also just Laura Dern as an actor, because the previous film she does with Lynch is Blue Velvet, and there's a very different character. That's very much like the girl next door type. And here she is playing even though I think she's only like 18 or 19 in the character. I think the actor, I think she was about 22 or 23.
Yeah, she was in her early 20s, I think,
But I think she's barely she's like 18 or 19 in the story, I think. And she is already a fully formed, strong, independent individual who has ownership of herself, what she wants, what she needs, and she'll stand up to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and her sexuality is not used to vilify her or degrade her in any way. Like, it's like she is, you know, she owns it, and she, you know, she's never portrayed as bad for it, which at the time, I think I mean, even today, like, I think you wouldn't find that in too many films, to have the woman character be as, you know, aggressively sexual as she is, and yet have it be a redeeming feature, not something that's a fault for her.
Well, and it's also like, it's a part of her power, because, you know, you think about it, you see the scene where she was raped, you know, by Uncle Pooch. Mm-hmm. And so, like, and that happened, you know, at a very young age. And so she learned there, you know, that she was like, yeah, I'm not going to let this happen to me again. Like, this will not be the case. And so it is very much a part of her power. Like, and again, not in a negative way, not that she's out there, like, she's not teasing people or anything like that. It is part of who she is. She has wholly embraced that. Sailor has wholly embraced that. And there, it's really like it's an empowering factor of her. And again, for 1990, that shit's progressive as hell, because normally she'd be like, oh, she's a Jezebel, she's a she's a tease, she's a slut, she's a whore, whatever awful thing people would do because they can't stand the idea of a woman having that much fucking agency. So like, and again, how progressive is Sailor? That Sailor identifies that Sailor understands that he knows that she is a force of nature and that he respects that about her. Like, dude, they really are like enlightened people in a world full of shit. It is amazing with the horrible backgrounds that they've had, the enlightenment that they have attained in themselves. Like, that shit's powerful.
At such a young age, because what's Sailor? 23, 24, maybe?
Yeah, I don't think he's supposed to be much, and the actors aren't that far apart in age. He was only a couple years
No, he's only 3 years older than Laura Dern. And talking about their agency and his just ability to listen and be a receptive and caring person in a relationship, like when she reveals she's pregnant, he's like, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. You want to have the baby? I'll be there. If you don't want to have the baby, I understand. It's like, like you said, in 1990, how many movies would that conversation even have been a thing?
Right.
It's potent stuff, man. Like this is it really was like a refreshing watch, honestly. And watching it now, when I can appreciate so much more of what's going on than I ever could, in my teens and early 20s. It's really, like, it is just a very progressive film. Like, it really is. It's very progressive. It's pro-choice. It's pro-sex. It's pro, independence and agency.
Yeah, the relationship feels like it feels like a relationship built on equality. I think all of it is juxtaposed against, because everything else in the film is awful, right? Like everything is awful outside of their love and their relationship, right? So it really does feel like them against the world.
Well, yeah, because it's either horrible people. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the most innocent bystanders in this film is Johnny Farragut, right? Good old Harry Dean Stanton. And it's like, if you look at Sailor and Lula, and you look at him and her mom, like, there is no equality there. She absolutely controls him. She absolutely manipulates him. She absolutely uses her sex as a power over him in all the wrong ways. And Johnny goes along with it because he's just so in love. He doesn't stand up for himself. He doesn't give himself enough respect. He just goes along with the flow. And they are the absolute opposite of what Sailor and Lula are. And they're the older people. They're the adults. They're the quote unquote responsible adults. And Sailor and Lula got it more figured out than they do. It's crazy.
Is this the first time Stanton works with Lynch? Because it won't be the last, but I think this is the first time they work together.
It might be, because I don't know what he was in. Did he pop up in Blue Velvet?
I don't think
so. Long
so.
since I've watched Velvet. I don't think he did.
No,
I don't think he did. I think this is his first time.
He may have been one of the most reliable character actors on the planet, though. He's just
dude. No,
whatever you need him to do, he's there.
Yeah. Like, even in Alien, which was a film he didn't even want to do, but he's great in Alien, man. Like, he's a reliable actor. He just gets it done. But you can tell he loved working with Lynch. Like, he really loved that man. And you can just see that. Johnny Farragut is a wonderful character in this movie. Like, you feel so bad for him because, like, he's just trying to get Lula home. He's just trying to make his woman happy, and he ends up paying the price for all of it, man. Like, and he dies in a horrible, lonely, terrifying way. Like, it's just awful.
Yes.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, and it's a side effect of her relationships and associations she has with other people because of J.E. Freeman's character, which I guess this was the year for J.E. Freeman to Santos being freaky hitman, because he's also the dean in Miller's Crossing this year.
Right, I'd forgotten about that.
Yes, God, that's right. Damn, what a year! Yeah. Shit. Damn.
And
That's
and
a hell of a
so
year for him. Shit.
and yeah, Grace Zabriskie, maybe the most frightening person in this movie. Like that scene is terrifying.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of
Dude,
nightmare
it
stuff in
is.
this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
I really I can totally see, Colin, how you could look at this as like they are absolutely in hell because everybody else in this movie is
yeah,
like
it's like
a
a demon.
practical demon.
Yeah,
Jesus
Well,
Christ.
yeah,
it feels
Yeah.
like.
it's either yeah, because it's either the people they're running into are the most horrible people you've ever met, or you're seeing like the scene with Sherilyn Finn, these people just meeting absolute horror, and the poor
Yeah,
cop and the guys that work at the feed
Yeah, if
store.
you
yeah,
wanted to, you could almost say it's maybe not quite hell, but purgatory, like on the way where you could kind of go either path. And
well,
if you think about it, like along the way, they do see like Sherilyn Finn, and she's not a devil, she's not a demon, she's an
no,
innocent girl. So they kind of see the death of innocence there in that
right,
moment.
right,
But then they also come across like like everybody at the trailer park. They're not all Bobby Peru. Most of them are pretty cool to them. They're nice to them. They're they let them know what's going on, let them know what's happening in the area. So not everybody that they encounter is horrible. I mean, Freddie Jones apparently like took helium before every shot, and it's amazing when he talks, and I laugh my ass off every time. But he's not doing anything wrong. He's just talking to them about the music that's playing. So I really could see it as like a purgatory thing. And if you think about it, at the end, Sailor has the choice to go down his lonely road to hell, or to embrace
right,
love, embrace family, and choose the path to heaven. Basically, I mean
right.
the good witch could easily be an angel, like easily
Mhm.
could be interpreted
Yeah,
as an angel, and
yeah,
sends him on the path of righteousness and goodness, where they will be a family in love. They have a child, and that child will be the center of their whole world, and you know for a fact that he will be. So I could even see it as a as a path into purgatory. Like you're on the road to hell, but if you make the right detour, there's still time to get off and maybe have a happy ending. So
And
you could easily look at it in
coincidentally,
that aspect as well. And
the road trip ends in West Texas, which some of us would say is hell.
Well, so that was going to be my next point, actually, which is that how Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet are often, and a lot of Lynch's work, but those ones specifically really sort of look at the sort of under the surface of generalized like Americana,
yes,
the sort of, with Wild at Heart, it's more like
scratch under the surface. Yeah,
it's not scratchy, it's like fully exposed. Like this is we're
Yeah.
exposing that, we're really showing just like that underbelly of of America, of American culture, or of like however you want to say it. Like we're putting it right out there without any sort of veneer of sort of respectability or whatever, right? And so there is a part of me that thinks like if he's talking about hell, he's talking about sort of modernity, and like the two of them falling in love and having that be their sort of one refuge out of what is this sort of modern existential way of being, right? So that was sort of like thinking of hell as more metaphorical there. But I mean, in either way, it's like everything around them is either terrible or like, well, it's either the people are terrible or the things happening to the people are terrible, right?
Yeah.
And that love is the way out of that, which is where the movie ends up at the end, which is why he changed, supposedly the novel ends with him actually leaving them. And
Yeah, I love the story behind
Lynch
that, because
he called him up and was like, do they get back together? And he's like, well, yeah, of course they do. And he's like, that's all I need. Hangs up and writes that ending.
because I guess the producer didn't like the ending, and Lynch is like, I don't like it either. And yeah.
Right. He wanted a happy ending too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I will ask this question, and maybe this is the important question I will ask tonight. Do you agree with me? Because this is where I'm taking my stand. Do you agree with me that Jingle Dell was abducted by aliens? That's my hardline stance. He was abducted. He was abducted. He was too in tune. He was abducted. That's my hardline stance. He disappeared. No one ever knew what happened. I'm telling you, that glove got let go and he got zapped up. Or he's in the
I
Black
mean-
Lodge. I'll also accept the Black Lodge.
I'm gonna say he's in the Black Lodge just to tie it to Twin Peaks, but oh my God, talk about another actor who should be primed to work with Lynch more.
Yeah, I'm
Crispin Glover.
Yes.
I mean, God.
yeah.
I mean, he makes Nicolas
first
Cage
time I
seem
saw
like a
this
normal guy.
Yes, he does.
He does. When I first saw this movie, I again, we were watching on videotape. We were laughing so hard at the Jingle Bell sequence. We had to like stop it and rewind it and watch it again. Because by the time we got to the point of he put a cockroach on his anus, gone, man. My 15-year-old brain was fucking gone, dude. I was crying laughing. And the way that Crispin Glover plays that scene, like the way he's moving his body and shit, like gone. I was fucking gone. And watching it now,
part.
like it's still so insanely funny because.
Yeah, I had forgotten he was in the movie.
Me too.
Yeah.
Watching it again, I was like,
I
how
could
did I
quote that
forget
scene
this
because
whole...
my buddy and I would laugh at that forever.
But I had forgotten about it, and I was, as that part came on, I'm like, how did I forget about this part? Like it sort of came back as this surprise. Maybe I blocked it out or something. But
that's fair. You would be within your reason to do so.
It was a bit of a surprise when it came
just
back on
him
again.
cutting up all those the midnight sandwiches when she comes in like, Dell, what are you doing? And the pause, like the eternal pause before he just slams his hands. I'm making my lunch. Like it's exquisite. It's Lynch comedy at its finest. And also, did you notice our favorite old banker from Twin Peaks is in the scene where Santos meets up with the mom.
In the motel in New Orleans. I was gonna say this movie is filled with these Lynch style characters, because not just them, but the guy at you mentioned his name with the helium at the bar in New Orleans. Like,
yes, Freddie Jones. Thufir Hawat from Dune, yes.
The oversized ladies shooting the porn in the trailer park, and just the guys that, like, it's just, even the feed store guys being so calm about their hand missing.
Right.
Yes, God. They can just sew it back on, man. We just got to find it. Where'd it go? They can just sew it back on.
Like, it's just filled with these.
Just taking off with it. The shot of the dog is priceless, man. It's like, because the fingers kind of come out before the dog, and it's just brilliant. It's an amazing shot. It's an amazing shot.
But
so funny.
I did notice. I was like, yeah, that's the banker guy. What's he doing here?
Yeah, I'd never connected that before, but I noticed it this time for the first time. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that made me so happy to see him, because like all those little old men down here, like even the main like maitre d' with his broken leg, like in his British accent, it's just fucking great, man. It's like it's such a great scene.
Only in a David Lynch movie with these
need everyone
people.
To leave. And our little old man banker, when the banker even looks at him, he's like, "Do you mean me?" And he's like, "Yeah." It's just priceless, man. Like, oh God, that little old man could steal any scene he's in. That guy was a fucking gift, man. He was precious. He needed to be protected at all costs. God bless that man.
So, do we want to talk about the
also
Wizard
like
of Oz?
the random shots I had forgotten about? I just wanted to say one last random shot I'd totally forgotten about, and it's one of those like only David Lynch would do this, and it's one of those like only David Lynch could get away with it. The first fucking scene of Mr. Reindeer where he's on the phone, and there's like this topless girl standing beside him. But when the camera pulls back and he's literally on the toilet, like I totally forgot about that cut. Yeah. Tears, damn near tears. I was laughing. So I was like, only David Lynch would take the time to make that shot. Like, Christ almighty, that's so funny. And then like when he hangs up and he just looks at her and she just starts dancing while he's taking his shit. I'm like, that guy lives the life I wish I lived, man. Just gonna put that out there.
That's a talent as an actor, to come off as this nefarious, intimidating, I hold all the power and I'm sitting on the toilet.
Yeah.
Like, that is a hell of a skill as that actor did in a, which apparently was a character Lynch added.
Joke, man. He's legit.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, is that he was one of Lynch's additions.
And you know what? and he really feels like he would fit into like Mulholland Drive, doesn't he? Like he totally feels like he could exist in that universe. Like he really does.
I'm
I can
thinking
totally
he
see
could
him
have
being
been
like
he could have been a co-partner with Jacques in Twin Peaks, like, you
That's
know.
also fair. Yeah, he absolutely could have. That's legit. Mr. Reindeer is awesome. I'd totally forgotten about him. Like completely forgot about that character. And holy shit, yeah, he's great. The party scene though, like I said, where you got the lady in the back who's topless, like breathing fire and shit. Like it's so
Yeah.
like bizarre. And then you've got Frances Bay, beautiful, kind, sweet Frances Bay, telling all these girls that it's your fucking jobs to be like, you know, like what these men want and stuff. Like just her as a madam. It was just like, wow. Did not see that heel turn coming from her. It's great. She's wonderful in it. But yeah, man, that scene is so bad shit nuts. It's great.
Only in Lynch. Only in Lynch would you get that
Buddy,
all combined.
Yeah, really and truly, that's the only dude who could make all this shit work. It's just that simple. But yes, Colin, let us go forward. On the Wizard of Oz, because goddamn,
so
it's all over
what
this
are
movie.
what are people's thoughts on that? I mean, it's not a subtle illusion. It's like very specific, very and quite frequent references. Obviously, like he went into this saying, "I'm using the Wizard of Oz as a device in this story." And again, I think that's another Lynch addition to this. I don't think that stems from the novel.
I believe that is all him. Yes.
Yeah.
So where do you think that's going? So again, I mean, tying it into what I was thinking before in terms of like, the Wizard of Oz is a story about a girl who goes to another land, right? And so it's about being trapped in another world that is off and is different, and where things are strange and not familiar. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on why the Wizard of Oz?
For me, it's always been sort of an allusion to this story being a sort of a fairy tale, a dark fairy tale. And there are definitely fairy tale elements all throughout the movie. To me, that's always what I always kind of saw it as. Like, I love the rainbows of color whenever they like have sex, like when they make love, like the different tones of color as it goes through, like the rainbow that's happening in that moment, because that is a moment of like pure being oneness together in those moments. Like they are one and the same. And I always thought that might have some sort of reason for that. But for me, it was always, again, because the Wizard of Oz, the books are so insanely dark, like really creepy. Like Return to Oz is the far more accurate Oz movie that's been made. And that film's dark as shit, and I love it. It's dark, but it's wonderful. But if you think about it, this is a dark fairy tale in its own right. You've got your two heroes, the prince and the princess. They're on the run from all these nefarious creatures, the Wicked Witch of the West herself, the mother, coming right after them. So they're against the world, but in the end, what happens? Love prevails. True love's kiss, true love is what defeats the evil. I mean, like, even with her mother's picture, like, evaporating at the end. I mean, like, it's like, to me, it is very much a dark fairy tale. That's how I've always interpreted it. And granted, there are layers with any Lynch film. There are layers, and there's no wrong interpretation. But that, to me, was what I always got out of it, was just the fairy tale aspect of it. That it is over the top. It is, when there's violence, it's insanely brutal. When there's sex, it's very intense. When there are bad guys, they're very, very bad, and our good guys are really, really good and really cool. So like, it's like David Lynch making a fairy tale road trip, basically. That's my highbrow, like high view look of it. You can really dig down into it, but the overview for me is just, man, he was making a really cool fairy tale for 1990, for a more modern audience, for younger viewers who would be really hip to what he's talking about. And that just was how, especially watching it this time, that was really how it played to me. The you can take it for face value and just say, yep, this is a story that happened to two people in our real world, and our real world is just weird as shit. There are things about it you don't know. There are things about it you don't want to know. And that's it. That's fine. You can
Yep.
you can take it for that. You can totally take it for that. But I like the fairy tale aspects of it. I like, the allusions to. I mean, you can almost say it's got like Homer's The Odyssey kind of vibes to it. Like the various things they encounter, the various stages of things they encounter, the death of innocence, the pursuit of evil. Like you can break it down as like a myth. I mean, you really could. So that to me is just where it's at. It's David Lynch having fun with mythos, with fairy tale, and also making a road pick about two lovers. Like it's. I think sometimes you can overthink it, but I think it's just kind of, to me, it's just kind of simply that. There are layers to it, sure, but to me, that's just what it is.
I mean, this is his most overt, most obvious references to Oz, but I think Oz is something he's been obsessed with his whole life, and I think how much of a dream-like and what's real, what's not real, illusion, disillusion in his work is from this Wizard of Oz, like, or you're going to another world. It's in all of his work, even though this one's like obvious because there's the red shoes, there's a good witch, there's references about the yellow brick road, Jack Nance's whole Toto thing, and
the Emerald City. It's all there, man.
It's all there, but I mean, I think and there's a documentary, and I wonder if we should talk about it. There's the Lynch Oz documentary that came out a couple of years ago. I haven't either, but might be worth something to talk about because it is so much so there's a documentary about the references between Wizard of Oz and his work. And I think you're right, Kevin. It is kind of a dark fairy tale if you think about it. Yeah, you could take it at face value as it's just a road trip love story and these two lovers encounter these horrible, horrible things that are very much things you could encounter in the real world. Like crazy
That's the sad
stuff.
reality is that you could.
Crazy things and unspeakable things happen to people, and there's no explanation of why people do the evil they do.
Exactly.
So for me, I think the Oz reference that is the most powerful for me, or the moment in the film that really touches me, is the part where she tries clicking her heels together three times and it doesn't work, and it just feels like, I always find that to be such a powerful moment. And there's just
coming off the heels of what Bobby Peru just did to her. Yes, that it's a very powerful moment. Yeah,
it's just such an amazing, especially knowing she's a survivor of abuse in the past. And how powerful she's been depicted, and seeing her go through that. And I mean, I've always sort of interpreted that scene as her doing what she needs to survive. Like that's how I sort of read that scene. But yes, sort of seeing that moment of sort of her at her lowest, and
absolutely, yes,
looking for something to save her, and it not coming, and so therefore she's going to have to save herself. And I just find that moment really powerful. But that's sort of the Oz reference that I find the most moving, and the one that I think about the most. I think
I always remembered. For me, it was always Cheryl Lee as the good witch, because she just looks perfect when she shows up. I mean, she really does. She nails it. But I love the whole thing of everything she's telling him is about the concept of true love. Like, if you really want to be wild at heart, to truly be wild at heart, you have to believe in love. You have to embrace love. And I love that, you could interpret it like it was just a fever dream because he got the shit beat out of him by about 6 dudes.
Right.
And he just saw some crazy shit. Or it's in the fairy tale, it's the divine intervention of the good witch telling him that
angel, or like you said before, maybe an angel. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's no wrong interpretation. As with
there's not at all.
Yeah.
Any Lynch film, whatever your interpretation is, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. And I will never tell you you're different. Like, you're exactly correct.
So would we say with the picture of her mother disappearing, that's them overcoming the odds of what they've had to deal with all these years, and then finally being like, yep, we are meant to be together, and it doesn't matter what comes our way, we're going to do it together.
Water on her. It really is. It's the bucket of water on her, because when she calls Lula, Like she thinks she still got enough power to stop her from being with Sailor. And when Lula is just like, no, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm done. Me and my son, we're going to go get Sailor. We're going to go. Like Lula at that point finally cuts the last tether. It's gone. She is now truly free of her. She is free to be who she wants to be. And that's when her mother, the Wicked Witch, that's the, in essence, the barrel of water getting thrown on her. She has melted. She's evaporated. She's gone. Like they will never have to deal with her again. She has no more power. She has nothing left. It's just them, and they're going to live their happy life. So she loses not only her daughter, but she loses her grandson. And that's like, progeny, that's legacy. That's, your name being carried on. She loses all of it. And now at the end of it, she was so powerful at the beginning. And in the end, she has no power at all. She'll be written off, forgotten. Nobody will ever talk about her anymore. And that's the greatest death that she could face. And so that, for me, I very much read that as that's the end for her. They're on their own.
Doesn't Lulu find out that she was involved in her father's death?
I can't remember. Like Sailor basically,
he witnessed
Sailor
the murder without knowing.
He finds out about it. But she tells him that, the story that she was always told was her dad basically killed himself.
Right.
So in the end, did she find that out? Most likely she did. I would have to think Sailor eventually would have told her that at some point, but I don't remember them saying it directly in the film. Like, I don't remember that moment, but I would have to think at some point she found out the truth. Yes.
Because that would have been another reason for her to be like, I'm done with you. You killed my dad. You don't want to, like, you're trying. Yeah.
The only good thing her mom does in the film is beats up Uncle Pooch when she sees what he did to her. That's like the only thing that's good that she does in that film. That's literally it. It's the only time that she does anything with any hint of a redeeming quality. And even then, it's almost like she's mad at him, but is she more mad that he did that? Or is she mad that he was spending time with her and not her? Like you could interpret that any number of ways. And no matter what, I don't think it was her really being altruistic, but it's the closest that we see her do in the entire film. And that is, sadly enough, it's in a flashback. It's not even in the modern time. So she is what a despicable character. Wonderful performance, but God, what a despicable character.
Like you were saying before, though, there's no, unlike other films of his, like there is no subtlety to the characters, right? Like they're all extreme versions of, which is again part of why it's either a fairy tale or or they're in hell or they're in some sort of dream, like nightmare, because everybody is so extreme. Like there's very little nuance or subtlety to anyone, right? Because even when with Sailor and Lula, they're good to a certain like in an extreme way, and I don't mean that they're angels, because I mean Sailor does a lot of bad things, but it's you know what I'm saying. I'm not articulating. I feel like I'm not articulating it, but that it's a very sort of extreme portrait of love, a very extreme portrait of good and versus evil, and not a nuanced one. And that's on purpose. It's not a critique.
Well, because this is very much as it is like a love story and a crime road picture. It's very much still a melodrama, and in melodrama, no one is nuanced or subtle.
Right.
Whatever they're doing in that, it is over the top, but it's not cheesy over the top. Like it's to the degree of the storytelling,
No.
Right. The world that he's crafted allows these characters to exist in a way that feels natural, even though these characters are not natural or feel
connected that's
to.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's created
I mean,
a
like
world
I
for the
one of my
film
favorite
that they can
scenes.
exist in.
To put it in example, like one of my favorite scenes is when Sailor and Lula first go dancing, and the guy in the crowd kind of starts, rubbing up on Lula, and Sailor just does this, and the band stops.
Yes.
Like everybody just shuts up.
They're like, oh.
And it's such a great moment. It's such a powerful moment. But even then, Sailor's just like, I'm gonna give you a chance. You need to apologize to my girl. Like he's not starting a fight with him yet.
Right.
He's like, I need you to apologize. or you're going to get in some real trouble. And then, everything's cool. She's like, oh, it's okay. You just, bumped into me. It's no big deal. And when Lula forgives him, then Sailor's cool with it. And he's like, go buy yourself a beer. I'm about to sing some Treat Me Like a Fool.
That's right. Because
the band falls in step with him.
Right. And I think that scene goes back to what you were saying before about he doesn't treat her as his property that he has to like show his ownership of. He was more protecting her. And when she made the decision that everything was okay, then he was like, okay, I can back off. Right. Like he's respectful of her agency there in ways that, again, like we're not used to in these kind of stories. Right. This is not how men and women set up their relationships in these sorts of stories, not in this kind of respectful and
then he takes the time to, after that happens, he then personally serenades her with the band behind him. But it's a beautiful moment because you got all the women off to the side, like with the pumped in screams. It's fantastic.
Right.
But who does he look at the entire time? He looks at her the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
The focus is totally on her. He's not playing to the crowd. He's not playing to anybody but Lula. And again, it's like they are each other's worlds, man. And it's so beautiful. God, it's ridiculous in that moment. Yes, but it's so beautiful because love's ridiculous and love is beautiful. It's all those things, and it's scary and it's awesome. And it's all those things are there in this film. It's, those moments are so potent. And then of course, at the end, when he serenades her with Love Me Tender, the one song she's been wanting him to sing all this time.
And I always sing it to my wife.
To my wife, exactly. And then there he is with their son in the car and in the middle of God and everybody. Right. And again, all the cars around him, horns honking, people yelling, even his kid being there. Where is his focus the entire time? Right there on her. Because she matters. It's just beautiful, man. It's just beautiful.
Well, I mean, talking about his character, even what sends him to prison in the beginning for manslaughter, he doesn't do anything till the guy pulls the knife out on him.
Right.
And then he goes to 11, but it's those circumstances of being almost killed. Even Harry Dean Stanton says
and
that.
What really sets him off, though?
Yeah.
But what sets him off is when the guy he calls Lula a see you next Tuesday. And he was just like, oh, no. You've drawn the line there, sir. You can talk all your shit. But the minute you do that and I see that knife, it's over, buddy. It's done. And again, it's so quick when the violence hits. And God,
but it also feels like he accepts responsibility for it too. Again, another quality I think would not like. He doesn't begrudge the fact that he went. Like he feels like he needed to serve his time for the way he handled that situation. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's interesting. Again, not what you would expect from a character like this in this sort of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. And it's so, again, it's why we love Sailor and Lula, because they're just like in a world full of shit. They really are these two beautiful souls that you care about them. You want them, to be okay. Like even when he breaks parole, okay, like he's doing it because he just wants to be with her and get away from Johnny Farragut and all that shit. But even then, it's just like he's doing it for her, like straight up. That's who it's for. It's like the whole world is against them. Like truly in this film, the whole world is practically against them, but yet they still rely on each other and they still end up persevering. And that's something that, it's just really, again, they are absolute like couple goals, man. Like that's what you want out of life, man, is someone who just would do anything for you, who's got your back, who believes in you, who pushes you, like that's what they do for each other. And they are so madly in love. Like, and it's intoxicating, man. Like it's it is melodrama, and at the same time, it's a bit of noir, it's a bit of fantasy, it's a bit of all these wonderful things. It's a crime drama. It's all these wonderful things.
It's also
a little bit of a musical.
At its absolute core, it's a little.
And it's also a
little bit of a musical shit.
All the emotions are expressed, right? Like it's not like things aren't under the surface. Like Lulu is so expressive of what she's feeling. She puts it out there. Like when they come across the accident, she is emoting what she's feeling. She's not trying to hide it. And they're expressing their love for each other. They are being completely sincere and completely like overt again about how they feel about each other. They just say it. There's none of this, like, so much of wooing and romance and relationships is about, sort of, in most stories or in even in real life, where like, coding things or trying to like seem more nonchalant. Like, it's such a cliche, right? That you're trying to look all cool and not, and then none of that in this. Like, they just lay it out there exactly how they're feeling. When they're feeling upset, they're upset. And it's the same with all, like, Diane Ladd's characters like that too. Like, her madness is expressed physically and is expressed in this horrific and visual, visceral way throughout the film. And she gets madder and madder as it goes along. And it's all just expressed and out there. It's and that's one of the things I noticed.
Everything's on the surface. You don't have to guess.
There's no BS. There's no BS with these people.
No. And I think that's what makes it I think that's really what makes it so damn watchable, is that you're not having to guess. Like, it's all, like, most people, when you start talking about Lynch, they're like, oh God, I got to try to, like, crack the puzzle and, crack the code, solve it. In this case, no, you don't. It's all right there, man. Like, it is all right there for you to see. And it really is just like, I mean, God, having not watched it in forever, man, like, it's one of those, like, I've got to really reevaluate my ranking of Lynch films, because this one really, it kind of gobsmacked me in a way that I'd really forgotten how potent it is. And honestly, even in my earlier years, I couldn't have processed how awesome this film is. I didn't have enough life experience to be able to process how awesome this film is. And it's one of those that just, like, I've really got to reevaluate my rankings, man. Cause, like, this is a great film. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, I got to watch this again soon. Like, I just got to, like, rewatch it, like, almost like right now. Cause it's like, it's a time capsule, and it's also timeless. Like, it really is, like, indicative of what filming was like, what movies were like in Lynch was like in 1990. But at the same time, it's also very timeless. That's a hard trick to pull off, man. Like, it really is. But yeah, God, like, just looking at this movie, like, it's brilliantly shot. It like, again, Lynch has that way of being able to take a normal sunny day and make it look terrifying. Like, when they're traveling into New Orleans, those slow-mo shots of the buildings with, like, the drapes and stuff flow, like, it looks terrifying. And it's broad daylight. And there's not anything done. It's just shooting it as it is, basically. But it's terrifying. The shack where Isabella Rossellini is, in the broad daylight. You hear that phone call.
Her.
Yeah, we could not leave without talking about her. Which,
that's true.
What is she like? Is she a hit person? Is she like a fellow? Because obviously, her and Sailor have a history. When he comes up to that and is asking her if there's a hit with
Bobby Peru.
She has the best name of any character in the whole, like, movie. I love the name Perdita Durango. It's just so good.
And apparently her character she has more prominent stuff in future books that writer wrote.
Right. Yeah, I could see her being, like, it does feel like her character kind of doesn't get as much of the attention. Like, it almost feels like they're building her up for something more later. But and maybe that's
especially when she gets away.
Yeah, but also probably because she's played by Isabella Rossellini. So we're like, and she is a rather small character, right? So it's interesting having her in a role like that, but she stands out and you'd, like, remember her. And I mean, there's certainly a gravitas and a power to this little character that's kind of in the background because of that too.
Yeah, and they were still a couple. Again, like,
when the call goes through, though,
her and Lynch.
They were still a couple, yeah. But it's like, when you see the establishing shot of that building, you don't expect her to be the person that opens the door.
No,
because it looks so terrifying and so scary. Like, there's got to be some big, hideous, huge, scary man back there, right? You don't expect the, like, is eternally gorgeous Isabella Rossellini to be the one opening that door. Like, you don't see that coming at all, and it's great. It's absolutely great. But it also goes to show that if you take that kind of reverence of, like, this is a terrifying human being, again, they've already done some work before that door is opened.
Yeah.
So she's not been seen, but you kind of feel it. That whole thing about the $2 silver, which is a great image. Like, that's so
Yes.
cool.
Mhm.
And when like the guy who works for Joanna has like held it up to his eye, it's a creepy shot. And then
Yeah.
you know that she's got the other one. Like, that's like, man, like that's some terrifying stuff. Like, you know that these people have connections and they are more powerful than you want to admit or that you want to know.
Right.
And man, like Isabella Rossellini is having a good time in that role. She does a great job with it. Her peel out where she not only gets away from the cop but swipes him down.
Yeah.
That's some ace driving right there, man. I'm just gonna put that up.
Yeah.
Well,
That's some ace driving.
even
That is not her first rodeo.
even though it's a very small part, I think that's the perfect role for her of what her screen presence is
Yeah.
because it's a little mysterious,
Yeah.
it's a little exotic, but it's also dangerous. Like
Mhm.
all those things
And she
are
nails it.
things she represents as on screen.
Yeah, and totally compelling, right?
Yes.
Yeah, even in
Yes.
the little bit that she has. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we were just talking. I was just saying about how everything is so overt in this, but she adds maybe a little bit more mystery, like because even the other like smaller like bad guy characters, like like when we were talking about Grace Zabriskie, like she's full on horror-ish,
Mhm.
right? But Isabella Rossellini's character, she's maybe the one area
She's
where there's a
noir,
little
dude.
bit of mystery.
Yeah, she's the femme fatale.
Yeah.
She's film noir, dude. Yeah, she's your
Yeah.
femme fatale. She is. She's great. I do think it's too interesting looking at the women in this film, that the women really are the most powerful characters. They're the ones who are doing the deeds out there, if you think about
the
it.
mother,
Perdita
the
Narango being
Lulu,
one,
yeah,
Joanna being another, the mother. Lula has her own power as well. Like,
yeah,
they are the most powerful entities in this film. Look at the car wreck. Who's the one person that survives? It's a woman. Like,
Right.
it's really interesting and very progressive for a 1990 film.
So
But I will say, like, for me, like the Grace Zabriskie scene is some of the most terrifying shit David Lynch has ever shot. Like, I had genuinely forgotten how unsettling that all is. And also, like, the heartbreaking ending of it with Harry Dean Stanton when she
Yes.
shows him the ring and he just
Yeah.
and he knows that he was sold out, basically. And it's just and it's sad because he just it's that look of disappointment and betrayal, but it's like he just accepts that this is his fate. Like, he doesn't squirm or moan or scream or anything like that. He
No.
just accepts it. And it's so
quite tragic,
heartbreaking.
though. Yeah.
And again,
yeah, because
it is.
he
It's so
seems like
tragic.
a good,
Well,
reliable
yeah.
guy, but he's wrapped in this. And also, is a little foreshadowing because we already know what's going to happen because the whole thing is like, he's like, because Jay Freeman Santos is like, you got to get rid of him. I'm going to get rid of him. When she calls him on the phone, he's watching like Animal Kingdom or National Geographic and the animals
Yeah.
being devoured by the predator. I'm like, well, that's foreshadowing that's going to happen to this guy.
Yeah. It's also foreshadowing that Grace Zabriskie is going to be doing it in The Return.
I
So-
thought of that too.
watching Lions. That's the first thing I thought was, man, this is all about, like, this is total foreshadowing for The Return. Shit.
Well,
It is
I
really
wanted to ask
interesting
you
that
guys about that.
that's what he's watching.
I wanted to ask you guys about that. Like, we talked about this as being sort of a step towards where we end up in, Fire Walk with Me and The Return. Where do you guys see those connections? Because in Twin Peaks at this point, David Lynch is very much working in the TV soap opera world, right? And he's doing it in his Lynchian way. But Mark Frost and that whole sort of TV tropes, right? But we talked about taking a pause to come and to watch this movie and a couple others because we wanted to see where the sort of progression was. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I think it's.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, especially how cinematic The Return feels. Like, I know Mark Frost was involved as well, but because Twin Peaks, the original series, was on network television, it's having to adhere to television rules. There's other directors and writers coming in. The Return feels very much Lynch's ownership, and his style as an auteur director.
Well, it's
And I
often described as an 18-hour film as opposed to a TV
yeah,
series. Yes.
exactly. And
Yeah,
I
it
think
really is. Yeah,
and I
it really
think
is.
as important as Blue Velvet is to his career, I think this is where people think of David Lynch, because as weird and bizarre as Blue Velvet is, and this is pretty straightforward, it's just very extreme from the characters and the performances. But Blue Velvet's a very straightforward movie, even though the subject matter is a little odd, and things start to
Yeah,
get not so linear, even though it's not a non-linear story, if you get what I'm meaning. Like the dreamlike images are coming more and more into his work starting here.
yeah. I feel like this is where you start seeing him get more into the dream logic.
Yes.
Because this film could be a dream. I mean, The Wizard of Oz in the end is a dream, right? Like, it didn't really happen, but it's a dream, right? So you could see that this is sort of that genesis of where he decided that I'm going to take my transcendental meditation, concepts, and I'm not going to be told by a studio anymore that I have to adhere to these standards. I have to do this, this, and this. I am going to do where my brain and my heart take me. And I think there are plenty of shots in this movie that you can see. They were absolutely not scripted. They were absolutely Lynch in the moment saw, like the little old lady who comes dancing out of the darkness, shaking her fingers and then just disappears.
Yeah.
Guarantee that happened right there, spur of the moment, because he just saw it and was like, I need that. I'm going to put that in there somewhere. And I'm telling you, like, that's where you start seeing these kinds of things happening. And this is where, when you get into, because season 2 of Twin Peaks is still being mandated by ABC. Like, he still has like a boss to report to, basically. But when you get to Fire Walk With Me, it's almost like Wild at Heart had to walk so Fire Walk With Me could run.
Right.
It's really a lot of the same things you see. And where I'm really going to get into it too is the listening to this in surround sound. The goddamn sound mix on this film is stunning.
I also forgot how hardcore that score was. Like, I forgot that. It's like, wow, it goes like extreme metal sometimes.
And I was watching in the credits, he actually got to do the sound editing was done at Skywalker Studios with THX. So he really got to go real into it there. So when you think about
fun.
When you look at Fire Walk With Me, it is awesome. But when you look at any of Lynch's films, he's always involved in the audio side of things. Like, he's always involved in sound, whether it's music or sound editing, he's always there. And this movie, he really got to have like a Hollywood studio budget for his sound. And Lynch is one of those guys who I really believe that knows that if you can shoot whatever you want, it can look like whatever, but if it sounds great, it has a different visceral feeling. And from Fire Walk With Me on, just look at the way he incorporates sound into his movies. Like, it's between soundtrack and sound editing. Like, I think a lot of that starts generating here too, because he got the chance to work with all the tools at Skywalker Ranch, that THX certification, and really got to hammer that shit home. They talked about like various sound effects they put together to get the sounds of the matches striking for those close-up shots. Like, there's human voices in there. There's like machine in there. Like, there's a lot of things they added to get that sound. And Lynch is like really getting into that now too. So there's just so much of who he'll be as a filmmaker going forward that this movie is where he cuts a lot of teeth at. Now, you can go back to Eraserhead and absolutely see that he's definitely playing in dream logic there. I'm not saying that it's the first time he's ever done it, but this is where he's really starting to incorporate that meditation he does. And he's really starting to bring that into, not even in the look of a film even, but it's more of what's going on under the surface, where he's not so worried about, I have to tell a story that goes from A to B. It can kind of go from A to E to G to D, and it'll finally get back to B. We'll get there, but I don't have to tell you exactly how we're doing it. I might not even know exactly how we're doing it, but this is from a filmmaker who is so much more confident in who he is and is so much more confident in telling the kind of story he wants to tell. So for me, it's almost like Wild at Heart is like a hard reset on David Lynch, man. This is where he really decided, this is who I want to be. This is who I'm going to be. and I will not fucking compromise.
Right.
And that's where you see a
Mhm.
lot of that for me in Wild at Heart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that I agree.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, and I think that there's the dream logic aspect, the commitment to sort of his vision for filmmaking. You see so much of this in his next few films, and I mean certainly the score here reminded me a lot more of Lost Highway than I had remembered, in terms of the intensity of it and the sort of aggressiveness of it compared to Twin Peaks and maybe Mulholland Drive. It really has more of that kind of aggressiveness to the score and to the soundtrack, for sure. I mean, I don't know, like, okay, so I'm just gonna put it out there. Like, for me, Chris Isaak's Wicked Game is one of my favorite songs of all time. I think it is a masterpiece, and I know it wasn't written for this movie, but just the synergy between like the nature of it and this movie and its storyline and the it fits, like it feels like it should have been written by David Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti. Like it has that sort of energy, like Julie Cruz music or something, right? But so it's just amazing.
And there is a Julie Cruz track in it. You do get a Julie Cruz track in it during the scene where the mother is getting behind the table and doing the cat thing.
Oh, I did not notice that.
That's a Julie
I'll go back
Cruz track.
to see that.
And the jazz lady who's singing in New Orleans, the song that she's singing is written by David Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti.
Right.
Yeah. That makes
so
sense.
they're all over it. They really are. But no, you get those wonderful moments, and this is I'm in complete agreement, Colin. This is a real synergy when you look at the soundtrack. Like even the Elvis songs they pick, even Baby Please Don't Go Down to New Orleans. Like there's some great classic Bebopalula. Perfect. Yes. It's all perfect. It's like it was like those songs were written for this movie, especially "Baby Please Don't Go Down to New Orleans." Like that's like perfection when that shows up. Like it's perfect. It's great synergy. It really is.
I think what works with the Chris Isaak song too, not just feeling perfect for the movie, but I think that song itself has a similar vibe. Like it's modern, but it also feels like it could have been a song in the 50s.
Yeah. And it's haunting, and it's about the world is on fire, no one can save me but you. Like the lyrics are just perfect. And
I think it's great that David Lynch was able to help a young Chester Desmond really find his way into the world. Right. A pre-FBI agent Desmond. It's a great song. The fact that Lynch directed the video for it is fantastic. It is just that song is haunting is really the first word that comes to mind. It is a beautiful, beautiful song, and it's so perfect for that film. Like it is a perfect marriage of feeling and emotion of the movie with feeling and emotion of the music. It is really something special. Now, my favorite Lynch film still to this day is Lost Highway. And it's funny you mention it because really there are so many like pre-Lost Highway vibes in this film. The shots of the road, the hard look of the asphalt, the very raw look of asphalt and the road, the raw look of even
this movie could have been called Lost Highway.
Nefarious.
It could have been, yeah.
It really could have been. No, it really. Oddly enough, Barry Gifford wrote that with him too, so it's the second collaboration. That's like even super cool in its own right. But for me, like this, rewatching this. Man, this may have this is probably now officially set in my top 5 Lynch films. Like I
would say it's for sure in my top 5.
It is just a magnetic film. Like you can't take your eyes off of it. You can't take your ears off of it. Like it is a film that does what film is supposed to do. It consumes you, and it just takes you along for the ride. And even when you know where it's going, you've forgotten little things, or even if you know where it's going, like the way it takes you this time, you might interpret something differently. Something might play different. And that's the beautiful thing about Lynch's work is when I watched it back when I was 15, it was a very superficial watch because I'm still figuring out how cinema really works. But I was still moved by it in my own way. Like it blew me away. I'd really never seen anything quite like it, much like Twin Peaks. It's raw, it's real, it is melodramatic, and it's funny, and it's dark, and it's all these things that shouldn't go together, but like chocolate and peanut butter, it all just kind of works, man. Like it really does. And it's as a 15-year-old watching it, and watching it as like a 25-year-old, and now watching it as a 48-year-old, like it played different in each phase of my time watching it. And that's real cinema, man. That's what it's supposed to do. And
that's a film that stands the test of time.
Yeah, man. Really and truly. And it was very deserving of the Palme d'Or. It was Diane Ladd was deserving of her Oscar nod. Like, I think Willem Dafoe could have been up for an Oscar nod. I certainly think Laura Dern should have been nominated.
Absolutely.
She's amazing in this film, man. Like, good grief. The fearlessness in that performance. Because, I mean, like, that girl's naked a lot in this film. Let's not even play around. Like, they are front and center, man. Like, and she even jokes about it. You know, my dad liked, you're like my dad. He liked girls who were, you know, skinny and had, you know, boobs that stood up and said, "Here I am." Like, she's all over it, man. Like she's in it. And again, but as young as she was, a lot of people would probably say, "Don't do this. This isn't some major studio picture. Don't do this. This is going to backfire. You know, you shouldn't do this." And she trusted Lynch, you know, to go all in, and she trusted Nicolas Cage to be her partner and go all in. And that's just a level of bravery that, you know, you're literally bearing everything, your soul and everything, you know, for this film. And you know that people are going to see it all over the world. Like, that's, and to be in your early 20s, you know, and the daughter of Hollywood, you know, royalty, like, damn, dude, that's a brave
lad,
dude.
Well, and you know what? I mean, no one can say she didn't have an incredible career and is still having. Like,
and has eventually gotten an Oscar.
She has this whole time. She's had an amazing career. She's gotten great parts, iconic parts. She's proven herself to be like an actress. She wasn't ever like a starlet or a leading lady. She was always a real actor who, you know, has built a great career filled with amazing roles, and many of them from Lynch. Like,
Lynch,
I still think Cann is my favorite of her.
Lynch thinks she's the greatest actress ever.
He even said
Lynch
that. But
she's the best actress you can see.
But I wanted to talk about her feeling safe and comfortable, and not just her. Do you think that Lynch is able to have such great female characters from the performers he's picked because they feel safe and secure with him, even though he's making them do these dark and disturbing things?
That's a good question, because I mean, I've never heard actors say bad things about working with David Lynch. Like, they all praise working with him, right? Like, I've never heard any interview where someone had any sort of issues. They all talk about what a great guy is to work with and what a sweet, nice guy he is. Like, I mean, so many of these directors that make these kind of films turn out to be like super nice guys in real life, right? And he's one of them, right? So obviously she keeps coming back to work with him, so she must feel like there's something there.
I think that right there is the proof in the pudding, because she's gone back to work for him so many times. And I know, look at Naomi Watts, you know, with Mulholland Drive. Very similar situation, and yet she's worked with him numerous times as well, including The Return. So I think a lot of it is, you know, just don't be a creep, you know, like respect the people who are doing this. And Lynch obviously does that, you know, and you know, again, working with Nicolas Cage, like, she had to put a lot of faith in him, and he had to be, you know, right there with her, because, you know, he's also, you know, bearing it too, you know, not to the extent, but still bearing it.
And he had a reputation at this point as an actor. Like, this guy does crazy stuff, you know, eats cockroaches and.
Right. And he really did that. Yeah. But it's like, I think it's one of those two, like, Nicolas Cage, by all accounts, you know, any actor who's ever worked with him has never had like a negative thing to say about him. Like, they talk about what a nice guy he is, and that what you see on screen is not really what he is, that he's kind of a more quiet kind of person. And I think really probably outside of the violent side of him, Sailor's probably one of the closest things to like him that we'll probably ever see, like in a lot of ways. And I think when you look at the two of them together, you know, yes, okay, like as an actor, and I've been doing theater since I was 5. I've had to do, you know, make out scenes, kissing scenes, the whole shebang on stage. And as an actor, like, you know, yeah, okay, I'm acting a part, okay, and it's not real, right? Because it's for stage or it's for film, but you have to be able to, not only does the person you're working with opposite like have to really understand that you respect them and that they are safe in what you're going to do, but you have to really like, you have your relationship as your characters, but you've got to have that relationship as actors. Like you've really got to sit down and like, you know, be okay with each other, like really talk about those things. And so, you know, I've done scenes where I do a lot of, you know, community theater. I've had to, you know, have passionate scenes with women who were married, and they had to explain to their husbands, like, look, this is going to happen, but Kevin's a nice guy. You can meet him after the show. He'll talk to you about like everything's cool. He's taking good care of me. He's not doing anything weird. Everything is done right there in front of the director and the crew. We're not doing anything anywhere else. It's all right there. And I think as long as you have a set that is doing that, and you've got actors who have that kind of respect for each other, then you can achieve those kinds of intimate scenes. And it's not, you know, lewd or unsavory. It's you know, kind of a beautiful thing. And you know, the other scene in this movie that definitely is on that same line is Bobby Peru's scene with Lula. And Lynch, you know, was very careful in how he directed that. And he just kind of let the camera roll. Like even before like trying to think about how he wanted to do other shots, like his pickup shots, he just let that roll a good couple of times before he wanted to make sure they were comfortable in that, because Willem Dafoe has to do some horrible things in that, and he's not that guy in real life. You know, like that's not him.
Yeah.
Laura Dern have him do these horrible things, and that's not who she is. So that took a real level of respect and trust, not only in each other, but also in your director, you know, and your crew, man. Like there's so many people there. Like it's an intimate scene, but it's not as intimate as you think, because there's so many people there involved. I think sound people and all that.
And talking about that scene, Willem Dafoe said, you know, he was having to drink so much water for all the takes, and it wasn't even a working toilet. Some poor crew person had to clean that up after they were done filming.
You know, it's that scene, I think, speaks to a lot of, like, we talked about this being sort of a sex positive film, and I think it really is. And part of the reason that scene is as effective as it is because it does establish, you know, positive, healthy sexuality as a juxtaposition to when we see a scene like that or the flashback, and it makes that, you know, that sort of assault even worse feeling. Like you feel the impact of it even stronger, I guess maybe is a better way to say that, because you see the moments where people are having sex in a way that is affirming and connecting and nurturing for them, right? And so when you see that, because you don't, like a lot of movies don't do a good job of really showing us really healthy, really, you know, positive sexuality, right? We're not necessarily always good at that in our culture. And so, but this movie, I really noticed how much of that there was, like really about two people celebrating their, you know, their sexual connection to each other and having it be a positive thing for them. And it was really refreshing to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a level of trust that has to be there. And you definitely can tell they have that. Like it really, you can genuinely tell in every scene that they really care about each other. You know, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they caught feels for each other a little bit during the shooting of this movie, because, you know, how could you not in that kind of a situation? Like you got to feel a little something, right? Like, but it's beautifully done. It's again, like looking at that film for a 1990 film, like you said, sexual positivity, not the norm in American cinema, certainly not the norm in the late 80s, early 90s. Like just no, just absolutely no. And for this film to have that, and again, even with the aggression of some of the scenes between them, so many directors would make that seem cheap and make it seem smutty and make it seem gross.
Right.
And not once do you ever think that, even with the aggressive music, even with the positions, and everything, you just never think that. It's not even like necessarily titillating, but it's not like uncomfortable. It's not bad. It's just like it's it's joyous is the best way to phrase it, I think, because it's not. You're not watching it thinking like, oh, I can't wait to watch. I can't wait till that scene comes. You're not thinking about it that way. No. It just happens, and you just go with it. Yeah, it's very different.
You feel happy for them, like you feel
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
It's so different from any other sex scene that was shot like in that time frame. Like you can't find anything that would be on that level. Not in American cinema.
And in the context of this film, where everything is so awful and everything like that they're facing outside of this is so torturous, for them to have that together again, just feel you again. It's joyous. Like I can't.
And looking at the color too, again, he brings in the colors of the rainbow in those scenes.
Right.
It adds this level of beauty to it, like a dreamlike beauty to it. Again, it's just this movie really like. I've watched it, like I said, numerous times, mostly like getting bits and pieces, but it was almost like I had not seen it before, even though I knew what was happening. Like there were some things I'd forgotten about. There were some angles I'd forgotten about it. Again, totally forgot about Mr. Reindeer, much like you forgot about Jingle Bell. You know, there's certain things you just kind of like, you just don't remember it all. But man, now that I've rewatched this, like this is going more into the heavier rotation. That's all I'm saying. Like this is really good stuff. Like, again, like the other two films I compare it to, like I adore True Romance. I think True Romance is an incredible film. And again, you look at the relationship between Clarence and Alabama, and they are just gaga about each other. And it's not about anybody else. It's not anything else in the world, man. It's just them. And so it almost feels like True Romance is like, and I know Quentin Tarantino did the screenplay, but it almost feels like a Hollywoodized version of Wild at Heart in a lot of ways.
Well, this came really before those ones. Like
this is 3 years before True Romance. When it's kind of go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, when you brought this up, I was thinking about that. Like in many ways, this opened the door for the whole '90s, like with Quentin Tarantino and so many of that sort of rise of that, what we think of in terms of popular cinema in the '90s, and some of the trends that it took. Like this really opened the door for that, because it was before all of this was 1990, so it was at the beginning.
Literally 1990, yeah.
Yep. And
this is before the whole Tarantino-esque take on cinema happened, and then Guy Ritchie and all these other kind of people.
Right. I think this film, I hadn't thought about that before, but when you said that in that trilogy that you mentioned, I was thinking, this film really was the one that kicked open the door for this.
And there's a lot of similar
stuff came later afterwards, but this was the one that let them happen. Sorry, Cody.
Oh no, you're okay. There's a lot of similarities between this and True Romance, other than True Romance feeling like a Hollywood-rized version. There's the Elvis obsession. There's the road trip. There's getting in over their heads with terrible people, terrible things happening, meeting these horrible people, but also meeting strange, funny people and interesting people. Also, Nicolas Cage ends up marrying Patricia Arquette, who's in True Romance.
Yep.
Like, so a lot of similarities, and they are.
I'm just looking at a list of the movies that came out in 1990, and I feel like I could safely say that True Romance Wild at Heart might officially be like the first real 90s film. That it doesn't feel like a product of the 80s like so many other films came out that year. They all still feel like they're a part of the 1980s cinema rush. And this film absolutely does not. Like you could almost say like this is sort of what started 90s cinema, like where it broke away from being everything that was like it was in the 80s and the 70s. This is a shift, man.
Yeah, this feels very much a 90s movie, because if you look at some of the other things that were big in the 90s or have kind of lived on since the 90s, I mean, Hunt for the Red October, that's a Cold War era spy thriller. Total Recall is an Arnold action movie,
Which feels like it could have made in the 1980s. Arachnophobia feels like an 80s film. Goodfellas feels like a Martin Scorsese film that could have come out in the 80s or late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
Dances
saying.
with Wolves is a Western ode,
Right.
that, like, yeah, Ghost, could have felt like it came from the 80s instead of the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything else that's kind of like, and then Dick Tracy, of course, is based on a pulpy comic book based off the success of Batman, so everything else, you're right. I think this probably is the most 90s. Even Home Alone, written by John Hughes, could have taken place in the 80s,
Oh God, yeah. Jesus, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So yeah, this definitely feels the most 90s and might have been the first official, because like Colin said, it kickstarted all these things that would go on to be kind of more popular in pop culture. But yeah, I think this paved the way for that style of cinema. So I had one other question. I mean, because we already talked about David Lynch and how he is to his actors, because Cheryl Lee made a comment, only I do this for David Lynch. But
Right.
the other thing I wanted to talk about was this won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, even though I think there were also people that booed it when it was screened.
Sure. Yeah.
But why do you think this had such a divisiveness? Because I know not all critics have loved David Lynch. Like Roger Ebert famously pretty much didn't vibe with Lynch for the most part. Only like gave a couple of his films positive reviews. But overall, like I think Eraserhead was well received critically. I think Elephant Man, of course, was nominated for Best Picture.
And Blue
Lynch was
Velvet
nominated.
Yes.
was also respected and was up for a
Yeah.
bunch of Oscars too. Like it was him sort of coming back. But yeah, I mean, David Lynch, I don't know if he's not divisive in a way like some other filmmakers are, in that people hate him or love him, but there's just people who will take him or leave him. Maybe that's a
Right.
kind of
Like even a lot of reviewers that gave this film and other Lynch film bad reviews, they're never criticizing the quality of filmmaking. They're never criticizing the performances usually. They're usually just saying like it's nasty or I don't like it. Like it's more of a personal, like it's just they don't vibe with it, I guess.
I mean, I can see why. I mean, definitely, this is not the kind of film that a lot of people enjoy. But again, I don't know if people like go around hating it in a way that like some films get that kind of like people love to tear it down or love to attack, certain movies or certain filmmakers and their work. I don't necessarily get that vibe from this. It's just like some people be like, oh no, that's not for me. Right. Do you know what I mean in terms of the difference there? I feel like there's a different, and I mean, I think that's true for a lot of his films, some maybe more accessible than others, but, because I've never heard people say they hate this movie. I've heard people say they don't like it, but to me, those are very different responses.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I've
Yes.
never heard anyone say it's a horrible movie or I hate this movie. It's more like they just don't like the subject matter of what the movie's
I've
about.
heard people say they hated Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I've heard that plenty of times.
Yeah.
Well, that also, when we get to that, was booed at Cannes.
Yes, that was.
Yes. I was just laughing because I just saw someone had put on Twitter, just a random post, where someone put that Wild at Heart is the first Quentin Tarantino movie. And I'm like,
well, I mean, I noticed that the next film to win the Palme d'Or was Barton Fink. So definitely it was starting a trend, right?
Yes.
Right.
Boys in the Hood would come out the next year. Like there's a number, like filmmaking was changing. And I mean, this isn't the only influence. I mean, there's other filmmakers like Spike Lee.
No. There's plenty of other.
Yeah. But for sure, I think it's changed. Things are changing. And this is definitely a sign of that. But yeah, I mean, this is we keep coming back to Tarantino, but it's definitely one of the most influential filmmakers of the 90s. And this
it's also pre-Slacker that comes out the year later that's very 90s too. And like you said, Boys in the Hood. And
So
there are some great films that we will think of as 90s cinema on the cusp here, but it really, in looking at that list, like this really does feel like, because it was 1990, this was like the first 90s film. Like it does not feel like a product of a different era. It feels like a new product in 1990. It doesn't feel like anything else that was being made at that time. And if you look at, because Tarantino scripted both True Romance and Natural Born Killers. Now, the film wildly different from his screenplay, but similar construct, two people in love with each other on the run, everybody's trying to catch them. Very similar concept. I've read the novelization of Tarantino's screenplay, and it's fine. It's just fine. But I love what Stone did with that movie. Right. But I'm just saying, at its core, though, those three films are about two people who are in love with each other, like they are each other's world. They're on the run. Granted, Mickey.
Well, I'm going to throw out another one that comes out the next year. Same idea. Thelma and Louise, and it's coming out a year or two later. So there's absolutely. I mean, this is kicking off a real trend for sure. Some great,
cinema, it really is, and it's so you can look at it as the starting point of really what 90s cinema would be. And Lynch would have some of my favorite films of the decade, in this run, and they would be the films that people would really think of as David Lynch films. When you look at with Wild at Heart, you look at Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. You look at, especially for me, Lost Highway.
Right.
Those are films that feel like, they are different films from of that. Even in the 90s, those films were on a different level. Like, just say what it is. And they were on a different level. Whether you loved them or hate them, but they were on different levels.
With this, I mean, so many people will say that the first great film of the 21st century is Mulholland Drive, right? And it was 2001, I think.
2000. Yes, 2001.
So
it was 2001. Okay, it was 2001. Yeah.
Again, like take that to like maybe he was kicking off the 90s, but maybe then he also kicked off this century too, in a way. With but we'll get to that. That's for later.
Yes, we will definitely get to that.
I think you're onto something.
I wonder if Lynch is also influenced by Terrence Malick's Badlands, because Tarantino mentions Badlands as a reference for both True Romance and Natural Born Killers.
That's a really good comparison too, actually. I mean, all of these things are connected. Like, it's not like
I wouldn't be shocked.
Came out of
it wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah. But it does feel like this opened to this, and it's
absolutely not. No. I'm just saying from a
But the way it had its success, like winning the Palme d'Or, creating this cultural phenomenon that was just beneath the surface, because mainstream audiences maybe weren't rushing out to fill the cinemas, but people were talking about it. Cinephiles were, they were all seeing it. Anyone who considered themselves into cinema was seeing it and talking about it, and it was, it was definitely in the zeitgeist in that way, right? And that and Twin Peaks, like to have that in the same year, it's like in 1993 when Spielberg made Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, right? Like, it's very rare that
and Schindler's List
have years like that.
Yeah. No,
that's a big year for him.
I mean, 1990 has to be like the year of Lynch. There's really no other way to put it. Like, it was absolutely his time, man. Like, and again, fitting, because it was the dawn of a new decade. Look at what Twin Peaks did for television going into the 90s. Look at what, Wild at Heart did for cinema going into the 90s. I mean, it really, you can't put too fine a point on that.
And not any decade, but the end of a century, right? Like,
the final decade in the 20th century.
About people approaching the end of something, right? And just how the way we process so much of that, right? He's definitely capturing that kind of, end of the world. Like, it's not, do you know what I mean? Like, that sort of energy of, what does this all mean? Like, are we going to survive into the next, that whole sort of thing. He's capturing that.
And I think it's a similar energy in that mindset of just like, this is, the end of the 20th century. So you know what I'm going to do? Excuse me. I'm going to leave it all out on the floor. I'm going to try everything I've wanted to try. I'm going to swing big, I'm going to swing for the fences, because what's the point in not doing that now?
Right.
Excuse me. I feel like that's sort of where
and he's referencing the 20th century. Like so much of this is like, referencing that sort of mid-century modern sensibilities and ideals, right? So whether it's like the Elvis and Marilyn references, whether it's the music, like it's basically reflecting back on the past century, but in a way that's looking forward and kind of iconoclastically, breaking it apart.
Well, and also thinking like it's the end of the century, where's the world going to? Like,
right.
with the whole, or all the news stories of these gruesome crimes and murders, like that's something people were very much feeling at this time. Like, the
And
world's
we're just
gone
a couple years
crazy.
away from OJ Simpson, man. We're just a couple years
Yeah.
away from OJ. Like it's all coming, man. Like that scene where she's flipping through the radio is almost prophetic of what was coming in the 90s.
Well,
man.
we're about to start the first Gulf War. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of, the Berlin Wall was coming down. Like there's a lot of things changing at that time, and there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, and definitely capturing so much of that. But really feels like I think we can safely say it was kicking something off and opening up a new way of telling films in the popular in the popular cinema. So it's great to watch again. It'd been a while since I'd watched it. Really great to revisit all of that, and makes me excited for where we're going next.
So where are we going next, guys? Are we gonna do Lost Highway, or do we want to tee up Fire Walk with Me right before we start the return, or do we want to go into Fire Walk with Me?
My thought was tee it up before the return, but that's
so Lost Highway.
I agree. As much as it's the next film he makes, and it would make sense to go to that one next, I think there's something about us looking at what else he was doing during this period, like the Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive, and then coming back to getting into the narrative of Twin Peaks with Fire Walk with Me and The Return. I think that feels right to me too, but
I'll be honest, when I took on this assignment to be a part of this discussion on Lynch, like Lost Highway is the reason I signed up. So like I'm ready, man. Like y'all don't understand. I'm ready for a massive discussion on Lost Highway.
Well, I'm excited about Lost Highway too. It's while it's not my favorite Lynch, it's definitely up there. And one of the most. And whenever someone asks me, because people will like, I'm not a person I'm the person who is very rarely affected by horror films. And if someone asks me, what's the film that scared you? Lost Highway is the film at the top of my list. Like if any film gives me nightmares, it is Lost Highway.
That's fair, dude. That's completely fair. I just thought, just in wrapping up, since for all three of us, I think it had been a tick since we'd watched Wild at Heart. Do you have like a reevaluation of it? Is it maybe farther up on your list than it was before? What are your thoughts having revisited this film?
Well, Kevin, I was about as young as you were the first time I watched it. I think I had rented it. I don't know if I rented it because it was David Lynch or I rented it because it was a Nicolas Cage movie.
Sure.
What might have been a combo. Wanted to check it out. Really dug it. Like the whole Wizard of Oz similarities, but I think I enjoyed it more this time than I did as a teenager. And like having watched Twin Peaks and then watching this, I'm like, oh, I definitely can see the Lynchiism and the connections here. And yeah, I would definitely say it's probably gonna be in my top 5 list.
So I don't know if it's changed for me. I always liked it. I still like it. I still get something new out of it when I watch it. It hasn't been as long for me. I watched it about I remember the last time I rewatched it was right before The Return, because I went through a binge of rewatching all the films.
Yeah,
so it wasn't that long ago for me. Like it would have only been 7 years ago now.
7 years,
yeah. So it wasn't as long for me. So, well, in I mean, it's the kind of film that I get new stuff out of every time I see it. So yes, I definitely appreciate it. I don't know if I appreciate it anymore. I don't know it like quantitatively. That's hard to say. I still like it. I still don't like it as much as Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive or Fire Walk with Me. So I don't know. It's still a great film, and there's so much I appreciate about it. And I think if anything, I've been going through a bit of a Laura Dern renaissance in the last 5 years or so, appreciating her more and more than I had before. And this just helped reinforce that for sure.
Yeah. That's fair. That's very fair. For me, like I always loved it. Like it was, if someone asked me, like, what are your favorite Lynch films? It was always one that would come up in discussion. Because it's such, even on just the surface level, it's just a great road pick. Like it takes you on a journey, man. It absolutely does. And it's got a little bit of everything. It's got romance. It's got terror. It's got film noir. It's got action. It's got comedy. It's got music. It's got
horror.
It's got horror. It's absolutely got horror. And it's, it's got, I mean, it really is. It's a melting pot of wonderful ideas, and it all works for me. It really does. But man, like rewatching it this time, it really almost felt like I'd never watched it before. Like it just really hit me different. And I like, I would say it's always been in my top 5, but man, it might start knocking some things around, and nothing will ever, I don't think, ever surpass Lost Highway. But boy, it could knock some stuff around for me. Like, now I will say, like, I have not revisited Mulholland Drive in some time, which I love that film. It would be in my top 5. But right now I'm thinking it might knock it a little bit. There's just so much great energy in this movie. And there's on every level, in every aspect of this movie, it energized me watching it this morning. Right. And it's just, man, it's got really, like, God, it really is something else. So I've got to revisit, Mulholland Drive, and I'm excited definitely excited to talk about that. My God in heaven, super excited to talk about that. But yeah, man, it could knock some things around. It just really, I mean, God, it just really smacked me in the face this morning. I woke up at 8:30 this morning and put on a pot of coffee, and I just started watching it, and I was just like, holy shit! Like, it's been a while. It's been too damn long. This is one of those movies I'm going to have like in my, I got to at least watch it once a year rotation again. Like it's that cool, man. It's that cool.
Well, now you own a copy of it. You can, since there's no digital copy of this movie.
Yeah,
out there.
I also think that
That's
it's
exactly
what I want
right.
to watch. I want to watch more often than I have been. So I think I'll return to it again sooner than another 7 years for sure. Yeah. But I'm very excited for Lost Highway because it's one of my all-time favorites of his. So I'm very excited for
it is
talking about Lost Highway. So
saw it 3 times. I saw it 3 times in 1 week at Canal Cinemas because I knew I'd never see it in a theater again. So I went like every other day practically. I took people with me each time, and both times people looked at me like I'm not allowed to pick movies anymore. So
I'm looking forward to watching this again because it's also been a minute, and I don't even know if I remember any of it because I was very young.
Well, we talked about soundtrack and being perfect for the film. Lost Highway is one of the greatest examples of that. I bought that soundtrack the day it came out. I had the soundtrack before I saw the film, and because Trent Reznor worked on it, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm a 90s kid in college, so Nine Inch Nails is everything. So I'm just like, I've got a Nine Inch Nails and David Lynch, like this is amazing. So I had the soundtrack. I had listened to it over and over and over, and all I could think of was like, I can't wait to see what visuals go with this music. And by God in heaven, it did not disappoint. It blew me away. So I am over the moon to talk about it next. But I will say, for those of you watching, if you've not revisited Wild at Heart in a Tick, or if you've never seen it before, but you're a Lynch fan, God, please watch it. It was just invigorating, man. Like it really got me jonesed. Like, this is why we watch movies. This is why you go to the theater. Movies like this. It really, man, I'm telling you, this film, it really, really hit me hard today, and in all the best ways. I've been in like a post-coitus glow basically with this movie today. Like, ever since I finished watching, I'm like, God, I can't wait to talk about this tonight because this movie is amazing, and I've really forgotten just how great it is.
I would say it's one of his essential films if you're a David Lynch fan. So it's an absolute must watch.
I would even say it's essential watching. if you're talking 90s cinema, I think it's essential watching, man. I really do.
Absolutely.
I
Like, I
really
think
do, man.
I never thought about it before you guys brought it up, but yeah, it very much ushered in the style and mood of filmmaking that was to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you're right.
Absolutely.
So, how does
Right.
the Sunday before Labor Day work for Lost Highway?
Which day is that?
What is that's the? Let's see here. Is that the first?
I could do the first.
Yeah, that would be the first. I should be good for that.
Yeah, because normally we do every 2 weeks, but I think the 24th I'm going to be otherwise.
I'm away that weekend, so
Okay,
So that's
would
fine.
work better for me too.
All right, as the first, and then the other thing I want to say before we call it is, we learned some recent news about David Lynch that he's come clean about his diagnosis with
Yeah.
emphysema and how this may affect or not affect his future in the work. I just want to say that our hearts and thoughts go with him with this, and that I hope he gets to enjoy as many years as he has to give us weather forecasts. And
Yeah,
Yes.
that news really hit me hard. But then it was funny rewatching the behind the scenes stuff on Wild at Heart and the interviews with him. He's just sitting there smoking in every single interview, and I'm like, yeah, he did smoke like all the time. But I'm not saying like he deserved it or anything. I'm just saying,
no.
Even he even said was like, I knew it was going to catch up with me because I've done it for so long. But he's one of those people that, by all accounts, man, a real mensch of a human being. I have never heard the opposite. People who have been fortunate to meet him in person say he is exactly what you think he'd be. He's like talking to your grandfather practically. Just a delightful human being. And so if there's anybody, on this earth that deserves, to be happy and just enjoy his life however he sees fit to enjoy it, it is by far David Lynch, man. Like, he is he is a genuine personal hero of mine. He is the person who got me rethinking how I look at cinema on so many levels. And he is just, it's one of those things where, as you get older, we lose people who, we followed, watching their movies or listening to their music. And the sentiment that I really try to take away from it is, I'm so blessed. Like, how awesome is it that I got to exist in the same time as these people? And David Lynch is certainly one of the people that I feel that about. Like, how blessed am I that I got to grow up, in the 90s as a teenager, discovering film, that I got to grow up with David Lynch. Like, he has had more influence on me than so many people. I mean, even people that I know personally. I've never met the man, but he's had such an influence on me. So, by all means, to Dave, man, like, we are behind you 3,000%. That's 1,000 per each of us. And, we love you. And if you would see this, just please know you've got 3 people who became friends because of your work. And if that doesn't really show how awesome that you are, I don't know what else could. You've brought people together in ways you didn't even realize. And I now have 2 really great friends who I will somewhere we will meet so that we can hang out in person for at least one day. But I now have these 2 wonderful friendships that have developed because of his work. So David Lynch, once again, has had a great influence on me. So, we just do what you want to do, live your life, be happy. That's all I'll say. Just be happy.
And we'll drink a cup of coffee for you, Dave.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. That was such a fun discussion.
Thank you. You guys have a good night. And thanks for, and we'll be back for Lost Highway.
Yes. So stoked. So stoked. Have a great one, guys.
Bye. Thanks again.